we are finally going to get around to doing one of the most requested videos, timing belt and water pump. Timing belt and water pump are such a frequently asked question because they come with such a high price tag. Depends on area, depends on the shop, depends on the mechanic. Again, I'm not a mechanic, I'm a DIYer, do this on my own. Follow me at your own risk. And I assume no liability for what you do with the information that I am about to give you. So the first thing, step number one that you should do, start your car, pull your fuel pump relay. My car, it's going to squeal. I have a pulley issue. Ignore the really loud squealing because I'm going to get to that sucker. Oh, you wait. Shh. Second step, disconnect battery. I have wing nuts on mine, but you might need to get a wrench in order to get yours off. I installed these wing nuts on here because I'm always doing crap to my car. Kind of make it a little bit easier to get at without needing a wrench or anything like that. Make sure those don't have any chance of flopping back on there and hitting the battery post. Now that we have the battery terminal disconnected, no chance of the ignition system going. When you start turning that crank by hand, especially if you have a manual transmission, it is possible for the ignition to kind of kick over and turn once, and you do not want that. That is very, very dangerous, especially if you have a breaker bar or a torque wrench on that crank bolt as it's spinning. You do not want that to spin over. So disable your ignition system, relieve the fuel pressure, disconnect your battery. You won't have that problem. You're safe, you're good to go for the next steps. Give yourself a lot of room over on this side because this is where you're going to be primarily working is around your passenger side, US model passenger side wheel well. I purposely moved my car over in the garage about a foot or two to give me this extra space on this side to work. The next step, remove your ignition wires and then rotate this off to the side there, and that way when you remove the valve cover, you're not going to break that seal. You're not going to move it out of its position that it might be molded into. Pull it out of the way and don't disturb the way that the PCV valve is sitting in there. Take off your valve cover bolts next. A set of deep well sockets, but you don't really need a set of deep well socket. Any regular socket will do. You're not going to be able to get these with a ratchet. You're going to need a breaker bar or a torque wrench or something like that. Now, as long as the wheel is on the ground, that's when you just want to loosen them. Star pattern. Make sure your e-brake is set. Come in here, put this sucker right underneath of the cross member. Position my jack right underneath of where the cross member starts so that it goes up right in that area underneath of that lip. And that way, if it were to tilt, it would grab that lip around the cross member. This is the lower control arm, and right where the lower control arm connects, there is a semicircle there. That's where I usually position it, but it really chews up my rubber jack pad when I do that. It gives me the most comfort, the most safety. Once I release it and set it down, then I know that my jack stand is inside of that lip on the cross member. If you're skinny, you might only need one notch. Me, I need two. If you have a rounded edge jack stand like this, that is a pretty good location because the rounded seat on the jack stand will round right on that edge for the lower control arm. I think that's a really good place to put it, but I like having the external lip kind of as a little safety lip for the cross member around it. I'll use that as a jack point, and I'll put my jack stand within the lip of the cross member. Now take a look at all 4 feet, make sure they're firmly planted on the ground. And now it's more important when you go over and you do the other side, when you jack up the other side, that all 4 of those feet remain on the ground. You do not want any teeter-tottering. That's your life under there. And I want you to be safe when you do this kind of thing. The curve of that face is not deep enough to accommodate that bolt. So you have to put the jack stand beside the bolt. And since I've already loosened the lug nuts on the wheel, we can just remove the rest of the lug nuts, take that off. And after you get that off, you always want to put your tire in here just for a little bit extra safety. Good stuff. If you've never drained the coolant, I'm going to show you how to drain the coolant. Remove your radiator cap, that way the coolant drains a little bit faster. That is nasty. You know what that is? That's rust. I think that's just impurities in my coolant bubbling up. But just to show you what I've been dealing with for many years. Yes, after a head gasket change. I mean, it looks like dirt. It looks like mud. If there's any professionals out there that they know what that is for sure, let me know. I'm not losing oil, which is why I don't think it's oil. I think it's rust. And I have CLR'd my system out to the point where I got rid of all of the contamination, but this stuff just slowly keeps seeming to come back. That is a continual issue for me. No matter how much work I do, this crap just seems to always come back. We're going to continue on with draining the coolant. Now we are under the front driver's side of the vehicle. What you're looking for is this drain tube right here. If you have an OEM radiator, this is probably going to be white. I've already replaced it. This is an aftermarket radiator, so my petcock and my drain tube are black. It has a long tube coming off of there, but I don't have that tube anymore, and as you can see from draining it, it's starting to rust where the water has contacted the frame, so that's not a good sign. I don't like that. No, bad rust. What I like about the aftermarket radiators is that they have a hex, so you can put a socket on here if you need to. I have my drain pan under here, so we'll go ahead and do this. Oh, look, did you see how brown it was when it first came out? Oh, that's shitty. Oh, yeah, that's a little bit better. Let it drain, let it drain. And if you have a V6, your petcock is going to be on the opposite side. It's going to be on the passenger side. Close that up. That way when you're ready to refill the system, you can just go ahead and refill the system. You don't have to worry about that. It's all set and taken care of. And next, I went ahead and cleaned off the top of my radiator cap. We're just going to reinstall that. Okay, and that should do the job nicely. And all three of those transmission mounts should be good enough to hold up the entire transmission and the engine. So you can relieve just the one motor mount, take that out, support a block of wood underneath, you'll be just fine. And I know that's the main load bearing mount because during my transmission swap, I had all three transmission mounts off. The rear, the passenger, and the front. All three of the mounts completely off, as well as the transmission was off. Only the engine I was supporting 100%, which I should not have been, by that mount. Well, not just fine, barely. It was actually going, it was tilting down a lot. And I was afraid this whole entire mount would snap off, take part of the chassis with it. It didn't do it. It's alright. Just letting you know, that mount, pretty heavy duty mount. But you'll be just fine supporting with a block of wood under the oil pan just for this procedure. I'm going to go ahead and take out that mount now. It'll make it a little bit easier to go at the 4 bolts that hold in the timing cover. 17 it is. It's a little loose on that other one. One is a nut, the other is the bolt. 17. It doesn't look like I rounded it off. It's pretty good. And then you're going to have to remove your wow, that sucker is on there. I don't know if that's stock or not. There's a little stopper. When you rotate the through bolt, it's going to catch that edge, and that's what will allow you to only loosen it from this side without worrying about a nut spinning on the other side, because it's actually going to catch. That way you don't have to worry about doing 2 wrenches, you know, one of those kind of things. You don't have to worry about that. Here's what I'm doing. I got my ratchet on there with a 17mm, just my tiny little ratchet. I got a cheater bar on here. This is a 3/4 inch cheater bar, and I have broken bolts loose like this before, but there's a very good chance that I'm going to break my ratchet, and if I break my ratchet, that's it. This is the only ratchet I have. Seems like it's working. It's getting a lot looser. Right inside here. And on the other side, just let that soak in for a minute. And there's the other side of the bolt, just so you can kind of see it backing out. And when it fully gets out of that washer should just drop right off. And then after that, I have to basically hit the mount bolt through. And as you can see, there is no room to hit it. I got no room here. See, these are the kind of things that no one really tells you about that you have to go through. It's like step A, remove mount. It's as if it's some 2-minute procedure. And there goes the nut. Once that nut drops off, come in here with the pry bar, basically just work that bolt right out. Well, it's loose anyway. Oh, that's close. There we go. Let's take a look at those threads. They look like they're okay. I'm in good shape. You're alright, mate. You're alright. With that through bolt out and those 2 nuts off, should just be able to kind of wiggle this sucker out. Might need a pry bar. This thing does not want to come out. What the hell? Is there another bolt underneath of that washer? There is. There's another bolt underneath. You know who did that? The Mazda dealership. I had the Mazda dealership replace these mounts, all of my mounts. Take off the body ground here and then spin it off. A little bit of oxidation, but it still looks like it would provide a good ground. I'm going to bend this little tab where the wire goes into the eyelet. I'm going to bend it up, and that way I'm hoping that I can just kind of wind it off clockwise like a bolt. Right. I'm gonna have to work at that one for a while. It's always these little unexpected things that get you. They take you 10 times longer than it normally would. Look on the back side of here and on the top of that, the ridge of that nut. The only contact that this was making was in a very small portion around the center ring, where you can see that is the only part that was contact. That's the only ground that was providing. It should have been a full flush mounted ground. It should have been ground around something like that, making full contact around the eyelet. Instead, it was only making a tiny little rim edge contact around that eyelet. I have no idea why. I don't like that. It's not the way it should be, in my opinion. Right down there, there's a little ridge of metal that comes out, which would prevent the engine from dropping completely anyway. It's kind of neat. How in the hell did I get that thing out of there? Wow, this thing is covered with oil. I'm leaking out bad around my valve cover gasket. Look at that. That is soaked. The next bolt for the upper timing cover, right there. And the bolt for the other side is right there. Now to loosen that up, you have 3 bolts. And the same for the alternator belt. There's 3 bolts, 3 main bolts that you have to get if you want to loosen tension on whatever accessory belt that you have. You have one that goes in from the side. And the same with the alternator belt. That's your slide lock bolt. That allows your bracket to pivot. Then you have the adjuster bolt, or your tension bolt, which goes in and out this way on your power steering pump pulley, and on the alternator it goes in the back this way. Then you have your main pivot bolt here, which allows everything to rotate. The entire bracket is hinged on that. That's a hinge bolt. The same thing with the alternator, except your pivot bolt on the alternator is on the bottom of the alternator. You have to get at it from underneath. It's a pain in the ass. Loosen that thing down there, and that is attached to the bracket for the power steering pump, and we have to loosen that, and then we can unwind it from the other side. I'm using a 9/16 to barely fit on the edge of that. It's slow going, but it is going. Okay, after you get that one, and you have to come over here, you gotta start loosening up this one. The same thing, just a little at a time with that stupid wrench. I have one of those ratcheting wrenches, and a ratchet's not gonna fit in here. I don't have a full set of wrenches, so I don't have every single tool available to me. Alright guys? That bolt goes into that bracket, and that bracket is what is held in place on the other side by the other bolt that I was working on at first. Remove this pivot bolt here. Got my 14 on there. You can see the whole engine moving. Crap. I'm going to put a 14mm socket on there. I'm going to use my cheater bar. There we go. You just have to loosen that bolt. You don't have to remove it. So it's those 2 bolts and that pivot bolt. And then everything becomes loose enough so where it'll put slack on the belt. Alright, now that we have the power steering pump loose, you should see there's a lot more belt deflection, a lot more play. Until you get plenty of slack, and then you can just kind of walk it off. You just come in from the bottom, play with it, work it out, until it's off of those pulleys. Alright, now with that belt removed, I should have much easier access getting to the top timing cover bolts on either side, now that that belt's not in the way. Now this timing cover should just come right out. Make sure you don't lose your little grommets that are attached to it. Should be little metal grommets in every single hole. So make sure you get those out before you put in your new ones. Take a look at that. See all the oil that's right around the oil well? It means that oil might have been seeping past there. See those little leaks? Trails that go down in there. Get at that, and that's what we want right there, that one. That's the water pump pulley. That's the sucker that we're concerned with here. The next step is, while that belt is still attached, loosen all 4 bolts on that water pump pulley. That way when the pulley is off, you can just swap over the pulley, because you will have to take the pulley off, put the pulley onto your new water pump. The new water pump does not include a pulley. You got to swap the pulley over. And in order to make it easier on yourself to get that pulley off, get it off now while it has belt tension on it. I just don't have a tool that'll get in there. I mean, you know what kind of wrench I need to get at that, and it's not a straight wrench. I had to go up to the store and get an offset wrench. This is a 10mm offset wrench that I got from Advanced Auto Parts. It's a fairly nice looking wrench, and that will easily allow me to get this on that pulley bolt because it's recessed behind the pulley. Even with that tension, I still have to actually hold the belt in order to have enough resistance so that I can work with these bolts. But there's absolutely no way you're going to be able to get this job done without a 10mm offset wrench. This is a requirement for this job. You cannot get a ratchet down there, you cannot get a regular wrench down there, it has to be an offset wrench. I'm going to reach down here and I'm going to grab a hold of the belt, and you have to hold it real tight. Alright, so there I have one already broken loose. Now I'm going to spin that pulley around 1 bolt at a time, and I will try to tighten this bolt. And by tightening it, it's not going to tighten anymore, therefore it will just spin the pulley. And get it to about that angle right there. And then you grab onto the belt, grabbing the belt with my left hand, and I'm going to crack this loose. Alright. Once you crack them loose, they're really easy to come out. And these are fairly small, really small bolts that are holding that pulley on. Alright, that's 2 down, and then just keep going around until you get the other 2 off. This bracket does not come on the automatic transmission. There's a bolt here and a bolt there, and you have to take those 2 off to get that bracket out of the way first. And yes, even though I did an automatic to manual swap, I actually added that bracket. What purpose does it serve? Not a damn purpose. The automatics don't have it, the manuals don't actually need it. It's just one of those brackets that doesn't do anything. Alright, here's the slide lock bolt on the side. It's right below this bracket here, 12mm bolt that attaches, or that goes inside of here. That bolt goes from there inside of this part, and a little bolt will stick out on the back end there, and it is really tight space in here. Alright, as you can see, this back side of this is starting to get loose here. I think that's good enough. The bolt that I have right here is actually bent. You can see while I'm screwing it in that it's kind of wobbling a little bit. That's because I over tightened it. If you over tighten this bolt, it will bend and will break. It's a pretty special long bolt there. You don't want to screw this one up. Loose enough, you should be able to slide this forward. Nope, I'm going to have to unloosen the pivot bolt on the bottom. Okay, under the bottom we go. Alright, that bolt right there on the alternator is the pivot bolt. Unfortunately, I have it backwards because I thought it would be easier. Well, it is easier if you remove it from the other side. That bolt is so long that it actually hits the chassis if you attempt to take it out from this side. Can't take it out from this side. It was a pain in the ass. It belongs on the inside. It really should be on the inside. That way when you unwind it, it comes out the other side, not this side. So I have to get completely under the car in order to loosen this, which means sticking myself between those 2 guys. Okay, you can barely see it. There is the alternator from below, and that is the pivot bolt. Now that we have the pivot bolt loose, you just go ahead and slide the alternator up, like so. This is the position that the slide bolt is in the lock position. When it's loose, the whole entire alternator shifts forward. Now with that alternator shifted forward, this belt should be very, very loose. Look how loose that is. very loose. To release a little bit more tension, just keep unscrewing until that bolt continually unscrews, and that'll give you a little bit more travel. Then shift it forward. That'll give you even more free play. And hopefully, because that's almost full, that should be enough. Just wind it right off of there. And you can just drop it right through the bottom. Now that that's loose, the easiest way to drop it through is to fold the belt like this and then slide it past that pulley. And just take it right out. And yep, you're going to have to get your hands all in there and completely gunked up and oily. Your hands are going to look like they've been cleaning up animals after an Exxon spill. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the moment that you've all been waiting for, the crank pulley bolt, aka harmonic balancer. You cannot get off that bottom timing cover unless you cut it off and you remove all the bolts, but you're not going to be able to access all the bolts without getting that sucker off, so it's got to come off one way or another. It's breaker bar time. Before you get the crankshaft pulley bolt off or harmonic balancer bolt off, you want to make sure that your timing marks are lined up and you're on top dead center. That means having the intake and exhaust lines lining up or marks. Those marks might not be there, so don't depend on those marks. Depend on the I on the left side and the E on the right side. Now if you'll notice, there are two different I and E marks. The intake is the left side, the exhaust is the right side. So if you see the E, which is down there on the bottom, on the left cam, that's not where your line should be. It should be on the I. And on the right side is your exhaust, so that's where your E is going to go, not the I down there. You want the intake and the exhaust cam gears pointing directly at each other. And when they're pointing at each other, you should be at top dead center. And you won't know that until you get the harmonic balancer off. And I don't have an air impact gun, so I'm going to show you a trick. If you don't have an air compressor or air tools, and you only have hand tools, you're not going to have enough torque, even if you have a breaker bar, to just break that harmonic balancer bolt, crankshaft pulley bolt loose. You can't do it. So I'm going to show you a trick, and I did not come up with this trick, and I've never done it. This is the first time I've ever done it. We're going to put rope into the number 1 cylinder on the compression stroke. That should provide enough resistance so that the crank can't go around, and it should break that crank bolt loose once you stuff enough rope in there. Like I said, I've never done it, so we're going to try that out. First step, get your spark plug out of there. Alright, so we want that screwdriver as far down into that travel as we can get it. I think that's pretty good right there. See that there? Pull out my screwdriver. Set that aside. Now I know that you should not use nylon based rope because you don't want these little nylon pieces breaking off and they basically melt. They will never leave your cylinder. Cotton fiber rope, once it burns off, no big deal. This might be a mistake, but it's all I got. And it's late at night, I can't run out to a store, I want to get this done. When you start putting the rope down there, remember that there's a little ridge inside of there for the spark plug to rest on. You have to make the rope go past that ridge and then down into the cylinder. It's pretty far down in there. Now we're probably about 90 degrees off the top dead center. Top dead center will probably be straight up and down. So we're about here, and I've stuffed it full of rope. Hopefully it will give us enough resistance so that it will break this bolt loose. I don't think I'm strong enough to do it. I think that's going. I think I'm actually getting it. The bolt's turning and the wheel is not. Or the balancer is not. Okay. I guess that works. Now, is that going to be set at top dead center while you're using this rope? Because you don't know how far you have to pull in order to crack that loose? No. You're going to have to reset top dead center when it comes time to put the timing belt back on. That's going to be a pain in the ass. But you know what? If it came off, it can go back on. No problems, man. No worries. As long as you can get it off, you can get it back on. No, D28 is saying that's what she said. Oh, and that's a 21 millimeter, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. There is a problem generally with most cars, but in particular on the V6, that this outer ring of the harmonic balancer will completely shear off from the rubber inside of it, so you'll just be left with a circular outer ring. And that's happened many times. It happened just yesterday, as a matter of fact, to somebody. So that's worth mentioning to keep an eye out for, is a separated ring on your harmonic balancer. Alright, now that we have the center bolt out, there should also be a washer inside of there. I'm not going to worry about that. I'll just let that drop out. But I'm going to see if I can wobble this off, and that bitch ain't going anywhere. So let's go ahead and we'll pull our rope out, and I'll measure just how much rope went in. Yep, that's the end, because I burned the end to keep it from fraying. We got all of it. Yep, just about 9 feet. Just about dead on 9 feet. 9 feet of rope inside my cylinder. So, 9 feet of rope required for this job. If you don't have air tools. Look, this tape measure is almost as big as my... Okay, so how are we going to get the harmonic balancer off? One thing you could do is try and pry it out. Don't recommend that. Another thing you could do is try and knock it out, either with a hammer or a mallet. But in either case, you're going to be prying on one side, and you don't want to pry it on one side or another. You want it to come off evenly. And that's when you're going to need a harmonic balancer / crankshaft pulley puller, also known as a steering wheel puller, and that's what I have. I got this one a while ago. Did not come in a blow molded case. You can get a steering wheel puller probably for about 15 to 20 bucks from Amazon. That's where I got mine. Mine is an OEM harmonic balancer steering wheel puller. If you have an import, you're going to want something that has metric. Usually on my car anyway, on the 626 M8 1.25, probably going to be the one that's going to get the trick done. Alright, these M8 bolts, M8 1.25, are really long, and I don't have any that are shorter. Now what I could do is cut these off, hacksaw them off, so that I could put this piece, Brian's Mobile calls it a space shuttle looking piece, could put this piece inside behind the lip. Now if I have to do this again, I might do that, but for now you can put it on the outside of the lip and be just fine. And it's pretty loose now, so I'm pretty sure that I got it off. I wonder if I could just pull this whole thing. Oh, there we go. There goes the whole enchilada. Everything looks okay. Wow. That timing cover is shredded. Then I'll just set the pulley on the ground and start unwinding, taking my hardware off. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you remove a harmonic balancer / crankshaft pulley. And it shall go back from whence it came until it is needed again. Alright, now that we have the crankshaft pulley off, we need to get our lower timing cover off. The main reason that this happens is oil leaks. If you want to save your timing covers and keep your timing covers lasting as long as possible, don't let the oil leaks get out of hand. I have an out-of-hand oil leak here. Right there is why you need a jack. You have to jack up the engine in order to get under the mount, in order to get that last timing cover bolt off. It's a pain in the ass to get to, but that's where it's located. 10 millimeter. And after you get all 4 bolts out, this cover should just pop right off. It's not going to come quietly if it's been warped. And then just kind of pull it out from the bottom. Look at that crap. Yikes. The next step is to remove your tensioner spring and your tensioner pulley, and that will relieve tension on the belt. Now while you do that, your cams are going to spin back into the resting position, so you can either lock them down now or you can do that afterward. As you can see, my cams are way off right now. They're not at top dead center, so I want to make sure that I get this set at top dead center first. Alright, and we will remove the shim, and that notch was pointing down and the cup lip is facing outward. So what I'm going to do here is just put my crank bolt back in, and hopefully that will allow me to turn the crank so that I can get it set back on top dead center. It is important that you get it set on top dead center. I'm just going to use my ratchet in order to put this on the crank bolt. Alright, now I have it set at top dead center. Yes, that is top dead center. It's not exactly pointing to each other, but the keyway on the bottom is pointing directly up. Those gears are pointing towards each other. They are flat, because I took a flat ruler and came in from this side, put it up against the cam gears, and that equals that tooth. So that tooth goes into that tooth. So we're looking good there. So now we have it set at top dead center. We need to ensure that those cams aren't going to rotate, and we can keep our position on the cam gears. Because without that timing belt, those cam gears are currently in they're in a springed position. Without the timing belt on and no tension on the cam gears, those two marks will not point at each other. The timing belt is actually keeping those in position, in the correct position. Without the timing belt on there, they will move. So we need to lock those in place. And I've done this before, and I'll show you how I lock mine in place. Alright, now the cam gears have these nuts on them on either side. One there, one there. So you can put a wrench on this. Now this is a 15/16 wrench. Doesn't exactly fit, but it fits it well enough to do the job. And your second will basically go like that. I use wire. This wire's not going to stretch. You don't want to use rope for this. Alright, make sure that's not going anywhere. Alright. The intake cam tied off to the intake manifold, and I have the exhaust cam wrapped around my header. Both are tight, they're not going anywhere, and we are set at top dead center. Alright, now that we have our cams locked in place, we can go ahead and remove the spring and tensioner. There's the head of the spring right there, so I'm just going to go in with some long needle nose pliers, unclip that spring. And it just basically pulls right off, pulls away. So fish it out of there. Well, that doesn't quite look right, does it? I really didn't do much of anything to the tensioner. As soon as I took that spring off, it just kind of didn't do shit for it. I expected it to roll back a little. It did not. Now, when you're shopping for new springs, you can get the spring, but this is the updated version that has a cap. All that cap, it's just a rubber black cap that goes on top of it. It's not hard plastic or anything like that. Just squishy rubber. But that doesn't look right at all. Look how mangled that spring is. I think it's time for a new spring. Yeah, comes with an instruction sheet, idler pulley, tensioner pulley, new spring. I'll just put that black rubber cap right on top of that, and of course the timing belt itself. So getting that in there, in through the chassis, there's not enough room, so not for this big guy. Hey, look at that. I do actually have a 6. Pretty neat. So it's a 6, and it won't fit in there. Nope. Not even freaking close. Now if I had like a small thumb wheel, maybe. Okay, so that's where the key goes. Alright, I think I figured this out. You know those stupid keys that you get when you have to put together furniture and cabinets and shelves and crap? Well, I actually keep them. And today that hoarding has come to pay for itself. Now let's see how this does. Alright, now look at that. Check that out. So you see how on the right side that belt is either getting shorter or longer? So a really tight belt would probably look something like this, way over on that side, right? And that should be what the auto tensioner job is. Alright, so that's how you do tension. Now I'm just going to go ahead and take that bolt right off, take the pulley off. It's coming out. Oh. Alright. Oh, it's got a little star bit inside. So it's a hex key with a star bit, so you could use either or. That's kind of neat. This pulley actually has a very slight wobble to it. I don't know if you can hear that. That might be where some of my noise is coming from. It does have a wobble. I mean, I can't really secure it down so that you can see the wobble. I'm going to check the other pulley just to make sure, but I don't think that's normal. B35-139D wax. 650 up here, NSK there. Made in Japan. Pretty sure that's original. Got a little bit of wobble to it. Now that we have the tensioner pulley off, as you can see, this belt is super loose. These guys up here, the cam locks, they're doing their job. And it is kind of shining in one spot there. This spot looks okay. I don't see any obvious signs of oil on the gears or the belts or inside the pulleys. It's very important when you're looking at the cam caps leaking or cam seals leaking. And these are new cam seals from when I did the head disassembly, reassembly. Everything looks okay. And there's your water pump housing. Now that you have that big ass pulley out of the way, you can actually get to the bolts to get the water pump off. It's like a bunch of junk. It's RTV. There's RTV around in these threads. Alright, that's one. Alright, next we need to get these two bolts and that bolt, which go up to the water pump, which is kind of up on that area. And down here you'll notice that there's a bolt here and there and here, and that goes to your oil pump. This section right here behind this gear is your oil pump. So if you have low oil pressure, more than likely you're gonna have to come in here in order to replace your oil pump, in which case you would probably just, while you're at it, replace your timing belt and water pump if you need to. The 626 has a non-interference engine, so if you do break your timing belt, not a big deal. Don't worry, it's not going to mash up your valves or anything. You're not going to do major engine damage. And I hear a lot of guys try and tell me that this is an interference engine. Oh, if your timing belt breaks, you're screwed. No, it's non-interference. If your timing belt breaks, big deal. Put a new timing belt on it. Your valves are going to be just fine. Next, we need to get at these bolts up here. I'm guessing those are going to be 12 millimeter. So when it comes time for this step, to loosen those bottom bolts, you might have some water that drains out. Remember this notch right here, so you can set the entire engine on that notch and not worry about the engine falling. It's not going to break that notch. So what I'm going to do is take my jack out of here, which it's lowered right now. My jack is off the weight of that engine. And this entire side of the engine is being held up by this one notch there. That's perfectly okay to do. And you just pull your jack out of the way with your block of wood. Don't need that for now. Now we're going to get our drain pan. We're going to slide it directly underneath of that crankshaft pulley, which is right next to the water pump. Now remember to be careful because I don't have a jack under here anymore, so it's not being supported. So if that notch does give way, it's going to drop down and could, worst case scenario, pin my hand up against the chassis. It's a big guy. It's a 9. Actually, I'll leave that one for last, and I'll go at this one up here. I know you're not going to be able to see that one either. Sucker out. Yep, that one's coming out too. I think at least half of these bolts had RTV in them. I'm guessing whoever replaced it last put RTV all up in there. I'm hoping this should be the last bolt right here. There we go. Alright. Whoa, that one is chock full of oil. That's not an oil pump bolt. That's to the water pump. I think I might have just hit an unexpected surprise. I might actually have to redo my oil pump. 1, 2. Oh, I see another one up there. Well, that's going to be a pain in the ass to get to. Okay. After I got that last bolt off, all that crap is starting to just leak all out, all over the place. Because that one bolt is hidden, that ended up being the last bolt. And as soon as I started loosening it, all this stuff started coming out. I thought I got all the bolts from the top first. I missed one bolt because it's hidden. I'll show you where that sucker's at. That last bolt is right there. It is back behind that little, behind the mount. You got your power steering mount to the right of that. Then you got your pulley to the left, and it's right there, right in between. You can barely see the head of it. And I missed it. Making a lot of mistakes here, but hey, we're learning, right? As long as we're learning. Turning and burning and learning. Now I got that last bolt out right there, so I'm hoping this thing should just come right off. It's rotating. Shit, do I have to take that pulley off? I'm gonna go ahead and take this pulley off. Idler pulley. So I think it might actually be holding the water pump on. So definitely gonna have to get that off. I want to get the water pump off. So if you plan on replacing your timing belt and water pump, but not replacing your idler pulley, it's at least going to have to come off. Well, there it is. That's got a long ass bolt on it. And sure enough, that idler pulley goes right into the water pump. Couldn't see it because it's behind the thing. Now let's try and drop the water pump. I have my drain pan down there. The water pump is not going to come out unless you remove the power steering, at least fold it all over out of the way, which means loosening this top pivot bolt, taking that bolt out, setting all this stuff aside, and then getting the water pump out through the front where that used to be. Alright. I'll take this whole thing, set this shit out of the way, and we'll just take the water pump right out the front, like so. That still looks like it's in fairly good shape. There ain't nothing wrong with that. Getting replaced either. Anyway, there's your water pump. Ta-da!